Radio Telefíséireann. Monday's edition of 6-1 News is presented now by Una O'Hagan.
The driver of Princess Diana's car was way over the legal alcohol limit. The Princess's funeral will take place on Saturday at Westminster Abbey. And in the run-up to multi-party talks, the Ulster Unionists meet the Catholic Primate. Good evening. The prosecutor's office in Paris has said the driver killed along with Princess Diana and Dodi Al Fayed yesterday morning had more than 3 times the French legal alcohol limit in his blood. A statement issued this afternoon said analysis of his blood indicated that he had 1.75 grams of alcohol per litre of blood, compared with the legal limit of 0.5 grams per litre. A lawyer for Mohammed Al Fayed said an eyewitness to the accident saw a motorcycle zigzag in front of the car before it crashed. Meanwhile, police in Paris are continuing to question 7 freelance photographers about their role in the fatal accident. From the French capital, our Europe correspondent TOMMIE Gorman.
This is the place in central Paris where Diana, Dodi Al Fayed and their driver were fatally injured. The road turns slightly and dips, but it's not a particularly hazardous route. Coming up on the left, with the flowers alongside, is the pillar hit by the Mercedes before it bounced off the opposite wall. It's quite clear that something unusual had to take place to cause the deaths of 3 people in one of the most expensive, safety-conscious vehicles in the world. The possibility of the photojournalist being found solely responsible for causing the accident all but disappeared this afternoon, following a statement by the authorities here in Paris. This relates to the driver, one of the 3 people who died in the accident, and he was a senior member of the security staff at the Ritz Hotel. According to French police, the alcohol level in his blood was 3.5 times above the legal limit. Outside police headquarters, the media vigil continues to see what happens to the 7 photographers arrested at the accident scene yesterday morning. They must be charged or released by 6 a.m. tomorrow. 20 rolls of film confiscated by the police are being developed. If it can be proved the photojournalists continued working rather than help free the injured, they could face charges.
If in any way the photographers or any other people were trying to delay, for instance, the arrival of ambulances or the police, if this is the case, then you have very strong penalties, and I don't think that it would be a big problem for any court, in Paris to pronounce a heavy sentence if such a case is proven.
A doctor who was at the accident scene soon after the crash today told of seeing up to 15 photojournalists there. So it's clear the photographers who took pictures of the crash victims and later offered them for sale had fled before the police could detain them. Meanwhile, the one occupant of the car who survived the crash, bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, is now in a stable but weak condition at the Petit-Salpêtrière hospital. Police have not yet been able to interview him.
In Dublin, thousands of people queued at the British Embassy today to sign a book of condolence and to express their personal sadness on the death of the Princess. Others left flowers outside, many with cards. It was announced this afternoon that another book will be available for signing at the Mansion House tomorrow and Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Embassy officials were surprised and gratified at the thousands who turned up to sign the book of condolence today. To allow as many as possible to sign without undue delay, the Embassy responded by making 3 books available and by keeping their office open tonight. The Taoiseach Bertie Ahern was among the early callers to sign the book and to express his sympathy to Ambassador Sutherland. He had met the Princess in London when he was last in office and spoke today of the high regard Irish people had for her.
I think the Princess of Wales was a very special person, and I think she was involved in so many humanitarian and charitable issues that people felt that they knew her, and I think that's the understandable reason why people are so shocked by the tragedy. And I think that the depth of the tragedy of her two sons. I mean, it is a horrendous story.
Mr Ahern said that only last Friday he had been notified by President Clinton that international talks aimed at banning landmines would open today.
We could not help but think that the landmine issue has been around in one form or another for 35 years. And it took a world figure to take particular interest in it to move that forward.
The Taoiseach Mary Harney, Minister for Foreign Affairs Ray Burke, Fine Gael's Nora Owen and Labour's Rory Quinn also arrived to sign the book. The Secretary to the President, Peter Ryan, signed on behalf of Mrs Robinson. Others who came to pay their respects were visibly upset at the death. Among the thousands of bouquets left at the gates were cards expressing a very real affection for Princess Di and an enormous sense of loss. The embassy will be open for those who wish to sign the Book of Condolence during office hours tomorrow. It will open until 7 on Wednesday and until 4 on Thursday. Books for signing are also available at the Mansion House in Dublin and at City Hall in Cork. As a mark of respect and thanks for her work for AIDS victims, the office of the Dublin AIDS Alliance will be closed on Saturday, the day of her funeral.
In the political aftermath of Diana's death, pressure is building on the government in Britain to introduce new legislation to restrict the media. But it was media attention that made Diana such an important force in the causes she espoused. As a campaigner against landmines, Diana had been invited to attend a conference which opened today in Norway. Her work on this one of her favourite causes brought the issue into the public eye.
Opening the proceedings at this 19-day conference on landmines, the Norwegian Foreign Minister praised Diana's efforts and called on delegates to observe a minute's silence in her memory.
We shall spare no effort at this conference to achieve the goals she had set for herself.
This year, Diana visited Angola and Bosnia to raise awareness on the issue, trips that were not always seen in a favourable light back home in Britain. But the Americans, who previously dragged their feet on the issue, have decided to participate in the Norwegian conference, where delegates from about 100 countries will try to hammer out a draft text banning the use of landmines.
I am optimistic that working together we will reach an outcome that will reach an agreement in the end.
And it's been suggested that as a gesture to Diana's contribution, the ban, if it is agreed, should be called the Princess Diana Treaty. Meanwhile, the involvement of the paparazzi in the events leading to Diana's death has brought calls for tighter regulation of the media in Britain, even though the photographers on these motorbikes were operating in France, which already has a media privacy law. And celebrities, who are no strangers to media attention, have also expressed outrage about the circumstances surrounding the princess's death.
The paparazzi were feeding them. Without those magazines, there wouldn't be the paparazzi.
But for now, the British government has no plans to move on new legislation, the difficulty being how to establish a law that restricts intrusion without interfering with the rights of the media to investigate. But the pressure will be hard to ignore.
The funeral of Princess Diana will take place on Saturday morning at Westminster Abbey in London. Buckingham Palace are still finalising the arrangements, but a spokesman said today that it would be a unique funeral for a unique person. She will be buried at her ancestral family home in Northamptonshire.
The public expressions of grief continue. From early this morning they came to queue at St James's Palace, where Diana's body is now lying, to sign books of condolence. The princess's remains were brought here after midnight last night and now rest in a place of honour in the Chapel Royal. Officially, Diana may have been forced to relinquish the title of Her Royal Highness on her divorce from Charles, but nobody from the establishment down is now prepared to admit that she was anything less than a full member of the royal family.
You know, I came here today from Southampton and it's very moving, very moving. I mean, I'm just, you know, shaking still. So, I mean, what if they decide, really? But, I mean, it should be big, definitely. Special lady.
Yeah, I think it's quite good. At least she's getting a good send-off, which is nice, you know. I don't think she would have got a state funeral.
Everyone loved her. They did, and that'd be a lovely thing for everyone. Yeah, it's just so upsetting. Just can't believe it. That's just what's happened. I just don't know what to say.
Diana's body is lying here now. There's no lying in state, and there won't be between now and next Saturday morning, when her coffin will be borne through the streets to Westminster Abbey for a huge public funeral. This is where they hold funerals for kings and queens. It won't be a state funeral, but to the British it will be all the more important for that. an informality reflecting the modernity of the woman. It will touch the heart of a nation as much or more than the state funeral afforded Sir Winston Churchill in 1965, or that of Lord Mountbatten when in 1979 the conflict of Northern Ireland reached into the very heart of the British royal family. After the Westminster Abbey funeral service, the body of Diana will be brought by road to her family's ancestral home at Althorpe in Northamptonshire. At her family's request, she will be buried beside her father in the Spencer family crypt. There are here the remains of the Spencer family going back 500 years. And between now and Saturday, they will continue to come to the gates of Buckingham Palace and the Princess's London home at Kensington Palace to pay their own respects, flowers and wreaths, and sometimes simply notes and poems scribbled on scraps of paper.
Well, Brian O'Connell joins us now from London. Brian, as we've heard, Buckingham Palace has described this as a unique funeral for a unique person. What exactly does that mean?
Una, I think what happens here is that Princess Diana doesn't fit into any of the categories, whether it's a state funeral, a formal ceremonial royal funeral, or a smaller ceremonial royal funeral, because she was in herself unique. Her popularity amongst the British and around the world was unique. Now, what they're trying to do is to have a big public funeral where thousands and thousands of people can come. It will be here behind me in Westminster Abbey on Saturday morning. The streets here will be packed with people. It will be televised. It will be as a state funeral. There will be officials and so on. There will probably be gun carriages and everything. But there will also be a more informal side to it that reflects the other part of Diana's life, the sort of people she mixed with. She was almost like a movie star to many people. People like Elton John, for example, will almost certainly turn up. But I've heard that, in fact, even though it isn't a state funeral, that there are rumours that President Clinton now wants to come and that President Chirac of France wants to come as well.
Does this mean, briefly, Brian, that the princess is now back in the royal fold?
Yes, I think we saw that yesterday when that RAF plane brought her body back. They took the coffin out and it was covered in the Royal Standard, trimmed with ermine. The Royal Standard is reserved for fully fledged members of the royal family. Officially, Diana was no longer a fully fledged member of the royal family. There are constitutional arguments either way. The royal family are not going to split hairs now because of the public outpouring of grief that we've seen here.